Hello YouTube, this is Bardic Monk, and today I'm talking about my solo Pendragon campaign. I'm doing a quick catch-up for the last 2 years, I believe. We have just finished year 508. Yes. So we're just finishing 508, and we left off at the beginning of 506. So in 2 years, we have two new cards, but they are they're a little bit more involved. The um, skirmish one has been very interesting to see because it's just the card itself, and it's the whole like for rating. I'll get into it in a second, but the rating rules were pretty simple as far as like doing a skirmish, seeing how well you defend your lands, and that's it. But for the big battles, I've mentioned it before. I believe I mentioned 4 characters prior to this, and they keep dying during the big battles. And slight spoiler alert, we we end up having in round 3, no, in round 2, already in round 2 of the big battle, the knight is down. Whether he survives or not, we will figure this out in just a moment. But I continue to be the bane of my own existence. For some reason, I always roll crits against myself. I don't know what it is. I rolled back to back failure for the knight and a full crit for the Saxons who are firing arrows and stuff at us. So, all right, here we go. At the beginning of the year, we have the spring court, and I was trying to figure out this year how does court work, and I was making a couple of notes for this, and all in all, I was like, okay, they have a couple of like tables and stuff, people like milling around. There's the high table, and then I'm gonna call it the throne for right now, but pretty much the seat of importance, because I don't know if every castle is gonna have a throne. Maybe they do. I'll figure that out later. I should probably add that note. Do all castles have thrones? So, in Court of 506, we have Prince Mark and Prince Elaine at Countess Ellen's court in Sarum. We check intrigue as Gerin. Gerin is outside, like brushing Sir Pholus's horse, and at this point, Sir Pholus has started the whole process of being a jerk to Gerin just to get him used to like all the snide remarks that the nobility is gonna say to him and his household. And uh, again, I really don't like having to roleplay or like show that, but it's something that I think is like it was one of the only reasons why I could think of Sir Pholus being sad about having Gerin as a. Oh, that's correct. Last time I did a whole set of like draws for the tarot cards, and we ended up just interpreting it that way. So yeah, he's being a jerk to him, but this year it's very much like be a jerk, be a jerk, be a jerk. But if you need support, be supportive of him. So this first year is a little rough for Gerin, but he manages to have enough back and forth with the family that he's being accepted, and in general, he's being utilized correctly, I guess. So for the first year, we really like simplified the year. We have the court happens. He checks intrigue. He hears that King Nantiliad is trying to get the Collegium together to vote him as the High King for Logris. And his exploits up until this point, even though we haven't really seen too much of it in the past, he has been doing a lot of work and a lot of battles to pretty much impose his rule over everybody else. Currently, he's been fighting like people in Wessex and stuff like that. If I remember correctly, it was in Wessex, but overall, he's just been fighting anybody else who try to become High King, and he's just really pushing his own power, and it's working. And Countess Ellen is constantly asking people to weigh in on the situation. So in the summer, we have an event for Sir Pholus where he manages to get a courtly skill mentor for 10 years. So his own courtly skills are going up. So if I wrote down all the stats in the previous page, yeah. So his courtesy is going to start going up. And I remembered before recording this video that I had to highlight this because he's like 2 years into this tenure, and it's turned into this thing that I forgot. So this should be going up, and I'm not remembering about this. So during the next year in 509, yes, the next year in 509, I will bring this character into the fold, and we will see how that affects everybody at the household. In winter, I rolled just to see what happens. There was a solo event, which if you look online for the summer-winter solo event PDF, I can't remember who made it. I will attribute it and link to it in the description. But there's a table that you could roll on to essentially generate these solo events for anything that you need, and I managed to print them out, and it is a very involved solo table that's 2 sheets, and it's ridiculous. So you're rolling on here to figure out which of these other tables you're rolling on to eventually find out what happens. And this is a very good, like very, very solid piece of no, not a piece. It is a very good resource for you, and I definitely recommend checking it out if you're even running a game for several people. The solo events are not solo gaming exclusive. This is literally for any solo action that happens, like one of your player knights decides they don't want to take part in a big battle, so they stay behind. You could use that table to determine what happens to them. So we rolled on that. He ends up having a duel where Gerin actually supports him well enough, and we have 10 glorias won by the duel for Sir Pholus. I'm not tracking Sir Pholus's glory, but it is something that I'm finding I need to track now, because something happens where now we need to know how renowned Sir Pholus is, and in turn, because he's Gerin's knight, how close to like the high tables, like the high courts that Gerin is like listening in on. The courts, the way that I see it, I have a couple notes about it, but pretty much I have them over here. That in the courts, I need to remember that the player knights are not high ranking or well regarded at the start of play, so there's a very low, there's not a lot of reason for you to have the player knights just at the high court for whatever reason. It's just not something that you do. They're so low on the totem pole, they wouldn't be in those meetings. They would be in the sub meetings, like where people start giving out information. So pretty much we have the high court. That information goes to the local courts, and the local courts usually disseminate that information at the Easter feast, which we're just going to call Feaster for right now. And because of this that I came up with after the fact, this is just the 1 year that we happen to be here. Gerin hears something and checked his intrigue. There was the King Nantiliad plot, and then I continued on for the rest of the year. So from here on out, my plan was to not have the court scenes as something that I interact with. It's more of something that informs the other feasts, the lower courts. We have an increase in awareness, sword, forgiving, and honest for the previous year, and for the checks that I had to make this year. And he ages up to 15 years old. And for his training, I end up with a size of +1. Again, something that I always feel like I need to bring up is the fact that he ends up this whole thing of starting as a squire and then having years of training where it's like boosted training, it could end up with a super overpowered character. But if I haven't learned anything from the big battles, is that it doesn't matter how OP your character is. As soon as they enter the big battle, it's over. They will die immediately, and you're going to have to roll for your next character, find a cousin in your line that you're going to have to take over. So I don't think that it's a big issue, and also the spotlight is technically always on me as a player because I'm running this game solo, so not a big deal. And I'm using this as a way to just like make him grow, for his character, like for him to physically grow, while having him only train in the things that he's done throughout the years. So it makes it more involved instead of like, oh, I aged up a year, so now I'm gonna pick 5 skills that I'm just gonna level up that I didn't even have to use throughout the year. I think at a certain point that's fine. I don't think that's a big issue, but the way that I've been dealing with it, I don't think it's too much of a problem right now. I did end up rolling for the childbirth of Sir Pholus's wife, Horatia, and we end up critting on 13, and they have a blessed birth. I rolled a 2, and it was a girl, and her name is Hertha, and the blessing that she has 2 things. As a blessed child, you don't have to roll for their survival. They are just going to make it to adulthood. And they also have different blessings, and the one that I rolled on was strong. So she's going to have a +1 strength at the end of all this. So, cool. That was the end of a very, very, very short 506, just because I didn't want to deal with how mean Sir Pholus has to be to Gerin just to get this across. I do know that in order to track this, I have the hate nobility. I'm not sure if I went over this last time, but just to summarize, I have a hate nobility passion on Gerin, and I just have him checking on it every time he gets bullied, and essentially it's tracking whether it goes up or down. And we're trying to get it so low that it just doesn't matter anymore, and so far he's been successfully lowering his hatred of nobility. Like everything just kind of like rubs off. I mean, doesn't rub off. It's ignored by him just because he's got a high forgiveness. So that's been working well for figuring out what's going on. I had a couple of notes, and the main thing that I wanted to mention was if you're running courts, the courts have 3 main reasons to exist for a game master. And for this game, you want to advance plots, you want to give news, and you want interpersonal drama to happen. So in the case of the high courts, we don't know anybody there. I mean, we know King Nantiliad, we know Countess Ellen, we know some of the princes and stuff, but we can hear about what happens to them because they are not directly associated with the main characters. In this case, who is Gerin? Gerin is the child of a new noble line that was literally brought up from the peasantry, so nobody really cares about them. They're an oddity, but they're not really something that you would bring to the high court and they'd be like, oh, bring them back, unless something miraculous happens. But pretty much they're being ignored after pretty much everybody has seen them one time. It's like, okay, they're a player in the court, we know that they are, but they're of the lower court, so it's fine. Just let them stay out there. We'll make all the in the high courts. We'll make sure that we have our own high court, and then they'll get the information eventually. We don't have to worry about them. The last thing I wanted to mention about the courts was the hierarchy that I'm using. We have the High King or the High Queen if that ever happens in any version of this game. So the High King or Queen, and then it's kings, queens, dukes, and duchesses as like different forms of the same tier. So then the High King, the dukes and kings, along with the queens and duchesses, and then underneath them there's the counts and the countesses. Counts, you could if you ever read any of the terminology in any of the books, they also call the counts earls. These are essentially two different words for the same title, as far as I understand. Not how real nobility works, possibly, but at least definitely how they treat them in the books. Sometimes Earl Roderick is Count Roderick, and then Earl Roderick in other books. So, because of Roderick, this has now become the male version of Countess is Earl. But I like to just keep them simple and easy, like Duke and Duchess. I can associate King, Queen. That's fine. As soon as you put Earl, I always want to say like Earl S or Count. If they have Viscount, I want to say Viscountess, stuff like that. So it's just Count and Countess for this middle tier. And then on the low tier, you have the Barons, Baronesses, and then I believe they are above or in the same line as the Knights and Lords. And then on the lowest tier of basic nobility, like you are in the noble tier, but you're above the peasantry, but you're not. You don't really have too much power in any of the courts. You would have the gentlemen or the gentle ladies and the squires, or and their ilk for any of the. If we have any other like equivalents for squires in like the church, right now it escapes me, but I will have to remember to start looking into what happens with the church in medieval times for this. But overall, this is what I had for the courts and the hierarchies for the courts. And this is just what I'm working with now. Again, every year I'm just trying to add one more thing, whether it's a new rule or just another way to look at something. This one I really wanted to figure out what the heck was happening with courts. So I have a few more notes that I'm just going to ignore for right now, and then we're going to jump straight into spring of 507. We have another court with Countess Ellen, who is siding with Natiliad. Sir Pholus is charged with garrison duty. I ended up writing. No, not writing. There's nothing written here. I ended up thinking about enrolling. That was the word. I ended up rolling to see if we either get to a big battle that Natiliad's planning or if we stay behind, and we ended up staying behind. And I thought, okay, so it's just going to be a way for me to have a solo event with Sir Pholus and Gerin, and not have to, but I would end up writing another book, another scene with the two of them. But it turns out that during this year, Logris is being sacked by Saxon raiders, while most of the knights are out in the war and the combat that's happening at that time. So this is what made me end up writing the skirmish rules for Pendragon. And without going too far into it, essentially we have to determine who's fighting. We have to do a battle roll for whoever's leading the forces, and depending on what the results are, you get a plus or minus or even like a bonus attack beforehand to see to add to successes and failures. But you're just seeing whether you can attack beforehand or not, and then you have the charge if you're able to. Fourth, you roll 1d6 to see how many rounds you have of combat. And you're going to run combat very much in the vein of regular melee. And the way that I was tracking this was I rolled 5 rounds, so I had 5 squares, and then I just put my usual like crit, success, failure, and fumble. I used these 4 symbols, and I just filled in what we ended up getting for successes for Sir Pholus. And pretty much the way that we have the endings of skirmishes, the last thing that you would do, the fate roll, you roll against the commander's battle, and I had the successes and failures essentially add to the number that you're rolling against. And in this case, the commander's battle roll is usually 8. I believe it's 8 for the person that I rolled here, and he ended up getting 3 successes, so it went from 8 to 11. We rolled to see what happened with the fate, and he succeeds. And then what ended up happening was Sir Pholus has 2 bad rounds, but then 3 good rounds, and it's just like the first couple of rounds that Sir Pholus has with Gerin. It's like their first taste of combat together. The duel doesn't count because it's not. It's like agreed upon combat versus you have to save the peasantry because you just got ransacked by a surprise invasion. So it was cool to see, like, oh, they were trying to get it together and then they ended up doing it. But I have these failures for Gerin because he just could not. He couldn't like predetermine what was going on in the battle and was just really lagging behind. Like everything that Sir Pholus needed, he always had to like wait that extra round to get whatever it was. If he broke a weapon or something like that, he would show up just in the nick of time with another one. But it's never. He's not the best squire, but it's his first time being a squire, so it's him learning. So in order to like try this out, I just had him rolling awareness instead of squire rolls, and he was just failing all of them. There was a small scene where Sir Pholus is trying to like, look, we need to run to this other spot nearby because right now they are at Buckholt just doing garrison duty, and they have to go to Broughton because they're the next ones that the Saxons pretty much ran to. One force goes up to Buckholt and the other one goes to Broughton, and they have to just run to the neighbors to essentially try to save them while this knight is out in the actual combat. So I use that as the excuse for having a second round of skirmishing just to see what happens. And in this one, again, a lot of notes, but we're focusing on after the scene where he gets pretty much talking to by another squire. Not like he gets talked down, but the other squire is telling him, it's like, look, you might feel bad now, but you'll feel a lot worse if you end up losing the knight. So make sure that you're at his side for this next battle, and let's see what happens. The way that squire rolls work is if you have a squire, you roll on their age as the target number. So in this case, he's 15. We're trying to roll at 15 or below to successfully do something. And Gerin was consistently hitting like 4s, 5s, and 1s. And he managed to do great for the 4 rounds of combat that Sir Pholus had. And they had a pretty good turnout, but they failed the fate roll. So they end up losing like half of their forces. But overall, I think that they had a really good combat round the first. A very good first skirmish. And the second one, it was good. It was they ended up fighting. They did very well for just Sir Pholus, but the group as like in total ended up not doing so great. So for Gerin, I ended up having him roll on other things because we're now, because of this specific situation, I am not the knight, I am the squire. So I wanted to see what other skills I can use, and an excuse to have like more check marks, but it's more like roll awareness to see if you can spot another enemy coming in beforehand. You want to roll first aid to help out somebody else, and so on and so forth. I even had him like try to roll his sword. He ended up rolling an 11 instead of a 10, so it was really annoying, but he ended up not doing anything that wasn't helping the knight, which is what he's supposed to do. So technically, he had 4 successes, but I didn't want them to add to the combat because he didn't add anything to the combat. He just made sure that these could happen as a base. So that's what I ended up doing. Again, the second one didn't do so great, but we end up having a good squire session, and this is a very good like first battle. I guess technically a second battle for Gerin. That goes to summer of 508. The first set of combat was bad because all I rolled was an awareness instead of squire. Oh, I explained all this. So I went over some of the processes that I was using, and I'm just still homebrewing some stuff because you never play Pendragon through like the squires specifically. Like they might be a supporting character. If one of the player characters are playing them, they might be the squire for another player. But I'm trying to like come up with like how supportive a squire is because we're focusing on his worldview. So, oh, that's right. He ends up rolling in order to like boost his skills because he just could not get anything done. I had him roll on his hatred of Saxons, and he ended up crit failing it so much that his hatred actually went down. And it's just it's a big issue. So, in failing that, he just was kind of like listless and just following orders, but not really. He wasn't at 100%, and it's like fairly obvious. So Gerin and Sir Pholus have a back and forth where he's like, "Look, you did great for your first time. Just do better. There's like if you think that you're worthless, I need to like get rid of you. Like don't think about yourself that way. You have to really like as much as I'm a jerk to you." He doesn't give away why he's being a jerk, but he's like, you are the start of a line. Your father pretty much did the deed that made you guys a noble house, but you're going to be the one who has to continue this. So please just keep it together. Do what you need to do. Learn from this event and just, pull it into yourself and just make it so that you can continue to be the best that you can. So at the end of it, Gerin pretty much like swears an oath to him, and he's like, "Yes, I will." I understand. And he kind of gets like a little bit of, with his intrigue roll, he kind of sees like the mask slip for Sir Pholus. So it's not enough. Like he still thinks he's like a jerk, but he's sworn to serve him, and he's also seeing that there's something there. It's not just like he's being a jerk just to be a jerk. There's something behind that, so he's willing to put up with it. I rolled on his traits, and he ended up, coming out as like, okay, I'll just deal with this. That's fine. In winter, because of, I think it was at one of the courts, I think he ends up like kissing a girl or something on a random event table. I think there was like one of them was like romance. So for Gerin, he ends up increasing his lustful, his reckless, his courtesy, and his sword. And he ages up to 16 years old, and we give him +1 con. So now he goes from 9 to 10. And in this role, there's no babies. Sir Pholus and Horatia just had a kid, so her con was down to 3 for this example, and they just didn't have a kid. So in spring 509, I have a whole script printed out just because I typed it up instead of writing it, and it's them meeting the knights, or the knight of the house here. And I finally, for the first time, rolled for Broughton. The knight of the house is actually Dame Magrin? I think it is. Braden. Dame Braden, who's a 34-year-old knight with a husband and 3 children. And I had, part of this whole thing was we have a lot of new tables for reactions and stuff like that, so I came up with a few more like NPC charts to like roll on for myself, and there was just a lot of questions. Like I didn't want to make her up completely with all my choices. Like most of this stuff, I just want to discover it and roll to see how it plays out. And we ended up having Dame Braden. I'll include her name here. Oh no, it's here. So Dame Braden, she visits, and she has a very good first impression, even though she doesn't like the not the nobility, the lowborn. And I had the D&D reaction table from Beckme, where it's 2d6. So you have 2d6, and then you're rolling to see how somebody feels about the player characters. And it's like on a 2, they're immediately getting ready to throw down and just slice your throat. But if you end up getting a 12, they're immediate friends. And in the 7s, 6, 7s, and 8s that you could roll on this table, they are just like, I don't know, just not really negative, not really positive, just like, oh, your person, I'm not immediately going to fight, so whatever. And on the rolls that I had to see how she felt about Gerin, he ended up having a good orate where he was like quippy, said something good on everybody's first impression of him in front of both Sir Pholus's house and Dame Braden's house. And I ended up rolling a 12 outcome on that. So now, even though she is, if I remember correctly, I can just read this. She is generous and arrogant. And arrogant being like just thinking very low of the peasantry. We have, just against all odds, she ends up liking him on first contact. So they have a good first impression. There's like a celebration at Sir Pholus's manor, or his castle, but Dame Braden essentially like hunted a hog and is kind of like sponsoring the thank you feast at their household. So we are mustering to assist Nantiliad's attack on Cerdic in Wessex to the south. Oh, yes, okay. So we have the winter phase, right? And now, because I know in spring of 509, there is the lower court, the local court. And pretty much this was like how some information gets to Sir Pholus, where we find out that Nantiliad is going to attack Cerdic in Wessex to the south. And pretty much they're talking about like how this first battle is going to go. And me, Bardic Monk me, I am terrified of big battles because they always turn out the same way. And I did not want to lose Sir Pholus already, because I had put a lot of like work into him. But obviously, I'm serving this knight. I want to make sure that he stays alive, both in a meta sense and in the story. So we end up starting Summer 508 with a basic rundown of what's going on. We end up having all the forces like calculated out, and I followed the process. The Book of Battles 2, I'm going to put a picture right here. The Book of Battles 2, it pretty much has 5 steps. Determine the status of your knights in this, in their positions and everything. There's a lot of little like, oh, they get a plus this or minus this, or they are alone, so they are more stressed, and their chances of breaking and routing are going to be higher. So you try to see where your knight is, if they're with a unit, what their unit's current status is, and then you start calculating intensities. Then your unit picks a maneuver. After that, you have a round of melee combat, and lastly, you'll end the round. And the only thing I'm adding here is for battle events. I will show you the page that I ended up making, the sheet that I made for this, but for the big battles, there's a worksheet on how everything goes. And it's pretty much almost out of the book, but I do have a better version of it. Yes, okay. So I ended up making a better version here. So it's all this, and really you're just going line by line. They give you the start of it, you do some basic math, and then you put the total here. Basic math, total here again. you choose a maneuver, you see who you're fighting, and how much glory they have. You see what your result is, whether it's a pass or fail. That might give you a modifier, and then your total, that's going to go back into this first number. So it's fairly simple math, but trying to figure out how to get that math is very difficult when it's a book that spans like 30 pages of rules to figure out what numbers go where. So I can't go over it here without it turning into an hour-long video, but just to go over the whole process for how it went versus trying to tell you exactly how all the rules go. The battle events roll that you need for this rule set is to roll 3d6 and then subtract 10. So you could roll 2 and then have a -8. You could get 18 and then have a +8. And it's going to be pretty random. And we had a -5 for the battle event. There was a surprise thing, so they gave it a +5, so they ended up zeroing out, so the 20 becomes a 20 again. We see what battle zone we're in. There's a unit cohesion thing going on here. That's going to change from place to place, but as long as you're not actively in battle with somebody, you would get like a -20. Again, there are tables upon tables across pages across pages. So we do all the math and we have a first charge and we end up critting it. And I roll enough damage for Sir Pholus and the followers of Sir Pholus and like that unit that they pretty much just destroy that first the first enemy unit of blue cloaks. And there is a good start to this battle. I was like, oh yeah, okay, this is different. We're gonna do great. We're gonna do fantastic. And then the second round, I do all the math again. We roll to see what happens. We get a better unit to fight against, but they will attack twice. And that's when everything fell apart. I have a bad result. I fail. And during this battle, during that one round, we have the critical hit. Sir Pholus goes down in round 2 because he is hit with arrows for 11 damage. He's hit with axe for 18 damage. And then he falls off his horse for 5 damage. His full HP is 28, meaning that he is in negative HP by the end of this round, and it is rough. I rolled 2 crits back to back. The arrows crit him, the axe hit him and critted him, and he was just down on the ground, and pretty much it was up to Gerin to pick him up, put him on his horse, and then just try to get him to the back lines. And the whole, man, I really want to do that video, but for right now, I don't know if I explained this before. This is pretty much the table that they have for where you are versus like where you are in battle. So you start off in rank 4 and then you charge into rank 5. For that first success, they run into there and then they do another attack. They end up in 6, and that's where everything fell apart. So from here on, Gerin has to grab Sir Pholus and then just like run to the back lines to try to get him healed. And we end up dodging and surviving 3 different Saxon combats while we try to get to the camp and heal him. So there was a lot going on. It was terrifying, but I managed to get him back there to a healer, and the healer ends up healing him just enough. I believe he had like 3 HP left, and as long as you are, if you die, I need to make that one of these. I'll leave a blank one out for myself for the next video. But when you get to negative HP, how HP works, actually, I should probably do that. How HP works for this game, you have a total amount of hit points, then your unconscious amount is your total hit points divided by 4. And if you get to that amount or lower, you're knocked unconscious immediately. I believe you might have a roll for it, but if you ever get to 0, you're just gone, right? And below 0, as long as you're not in positive HP, you will die by midnight of that night. If there's nothing that like heals you, like if you're still at negative by midnight that night, you're dead. So that happened to my previous 3 nights. I was really mad when it happened in one round after such a good round. Um, I was mad that my dice just decided to crit Sir Pholus so badly. Um, but each wound that you take, so when he got hit by the arrows, that was wound 1. When he got hit by an axe, that's wound 2. He fell off the horse, that's wound 3. And the healer at the camp gets to heal these each as 1. So he healed them for 3 at 1, 3 at 2, and 3 at 3 because he rolled and managed to do first aid on all 3. Sir Pholus is alive, barely. He's unconscious, definitely. And I need to get him back home after this battle's done. So Gerin peeks out from the tent and was like, well, now that Sir Gerin and Sir Pholus is alive, I just want to see what's going on with the battle. And he looks out and he gets to see pretty much spoilers for this year for 508, but King Nantiliad dies in battle. Gerin spots what happens. He doesn't see who does it. He sees a force doing it, but he doesn't recognize. He sees only Saxons are doing it. Let's put it that way. He doesn't spot who the person is or whose house's colors are being, like whose banner he's seeing in the distance. He can't recognize it, so he sees that the Saxons are pretty much winning that battle, and the entire army is just like routing immediately after that starts happening. So this event turns Gerin into who is this? Is it Paul Revere? Yes. Gerin becomes the medieval Paul Revere for this game, and it's very funny to me that he now becomes important, because I really did roll on, can he keep his wits about him? He did. What are they trying to do? He's going to try to run back home with Sir Pholus and try to like help as many people as possible to like get out of there. Really, he's just yelling to let them know that the battle's not going their way and they need to run. So he saves a couple people that way just by just yelling that the Saxons are coming. And all throughout the road back from Winchester all the way heading back up north to Salisbury, he was just yelling to everybody that he passes by, any village, that pretty much the Saxons are going to start invading, you need to run now. And that's where we kind of leave off. This last bit that I have here is a scene between Gerin, Sir Pholus, and Horatia, Sir Pholus's wife, where Sir Pholus has a near-death experience. I think he's also dealing with survivor's guilt, where a lot of people didn't make it out of that battle. There are a lot of widows and widowers at the end of the battle here in 508, and he just is like saying, no, thank you so much for getting me out of there. Like, I'm really lucky to have made it out. And then for Winter, after that, I ended up having Winter rolling to see what happens, and I know that the Lord visits in, what are my rules? Your own land. The Lord visits, you deal with commoners and stuff like that, but I wanted to know when the Lord visits, and it is during winter. And I think that because of the situation, I had another one of these rolls, and it ended up with Countess Ellen wanting to go visit Sir Pholus because he's one of the few survivors, and they're also there's rumors that are like a squire is the one who pretty much warned everybody that everything went down, and they're trying to find out who it is. And part of that event here is to say, like, no, I'll swear to you that you'll get your due. You saved a lot of people and a lot of villages and stuff like that from being ransacked. The entirety of the after effects of that summer after that battle is, I think, all of Wessex essentially just gets, I don't know if it's Wessex or not, but all of like Winchester just gets, we'll say Winchester, all of Winchester gets enslaved. Just anybody who didn't make it out of there, they're just slaves now. And it's just a lot of awful stuff happened, and they're trying to find out, just for any sort of I think for morale purposes, they're trying to find out who did it, like who ended up helping all these people, and it's turning into just like Gerin managed to say the right thing at the right time, and a lot of people's reactions to his warnings were like, everybody actually started running. So it worked out. The dice, again, I don't know what it is. I didn't make this so that Gerin was supposed to be very important. I also kept rolling to make sure, like, do they actually take it to heart, or people just like see that and then do they start panicking? Do they just like run in the direction that he's saying? Do they run in the wrong direction? Do they ignore him? All that type of stuff. I'm doing all these rules just to see how the world reacts to him, and I'm not trying to force the story into a direction. It's just how things go. If it's Gerin in combat, I cannot roll anything for him. I don't know what it is. He's terrible. If I need to roll anything for the Saxons, I will immediately kill any knights I have to roll against. I don't know what it is. For once, he didn't take enough damage to die, so Sir Pholus is alive and still healing 2 months later. I did say right before the second crit roll, I was like, please just roll low. Please roll low. Please just roll low. And I ended up rolling like on 10 dice or something. It was like 3 1s and 2 2s. And there was like 1 3, and then like, it was mostly 3s, and then like 1 6 and like 2 5s. So after everything, I just knew that he managed to just squeak by. If those 3 1s did not get rolled, Sir Pholus would be dead. So that's where I'm at right now. I have not figured out what Countess Helen's going to say. I don't know what they're going to do. I feel like this is something that's going to reflect very positively to his father, and his father might be paid back for the good that his family has done for not just Logris, but Salisbury specifically. And it's going to turn into one of those things, like he's probably going to be known like Gerin the, I don't know, the Crier or something like that. So this is going to be probably the way that he's known before being knighted at like in the courts. So very interesting, very interesting. Again, I really did want to start this character as like we're going to start from 0, and then we're going to build up our fame from here and see what happens. And anytime I want to do anything that's like mechanically important, it's turned into a crapshoot for a lot of any of his combat roles, where I was like, he's going to be like this guy who's really good with the sword. No, that's not the case. He's got a decent sword stat, but I cannot roll below an 11 to save his life. He's very good at squire rolls. I can roll below a 16 no problem, but it is really turning into a big issue of keeping people alive during a big battle. Now that I finally got the big battles working, I will make a video on how that... So for the next video, I'm thinking about doing a rules breakdown for what I've done so far. Specifically, the big book of battle is a little complicated. I wanted to simplify it a little bit. Me explaining these rules, I would be a little bit more worried about doing like a full rules breakdown for these cards. I will share them without like going full into detail about everything, but the big book of battle was a little hard to parse out, and there are so many tables and bits of information that you're missing from that video that I'm going to make that I don't think that it's going to replace the rule book. And it's very much a, if you want this system, buy the book of battle 2, the red cover one. Again, I had posted a picture earlier, but again, I started this whole channel just to help people out, not just for solo role-playing, but Pendragon is a little hard to parse sometimes for myself, and I wanted to post this for anybody who's also having issues. So, next video, we're going to do a real quick rule breakdown, and I think it'll help out a lot for demystifying what a big battle looks like. These are different rules than what happens in the starter set, which I'm going to use the starter set's rules from this point on just to see what the differences are, and if it decreases my chances of completely obliterating my knights. I'm hoping that failures will result in like capture more than death. This is my first big battle out of 4 that have left my knight and my character alive. So thank you for watching again. I'll be back next time. Definitely next Sunday. I'm going to try to keep Sundays the updates for my game. So we'll see what happens with Countess Ellen on Sunday. We'll see what happens after the winter events and the events of 509, which, if I remember correctly, is the year that the starter box takes place. And we're going to have the Collegium probably state that, if I have my timeline correct. Again, I'm not reading ahead too much. But in this case, I think they say anybody who wins this first big battle, this first tournament, this is the birth of the tournament. But if whoever wins that can be High King. Something I also have to deal with is the fact that I have not mentioned the Sword in the Stone, and I'm very curious when. I'm going to write that down. When does the sword appear? So we have that, and I also had a curiosity with what's in an entourage, because your knight is running around with a couple people. It's not just you and your squire all the time. You'll have various people doing various things for you. This video is already long enough. Thank you very much if you've made it to the end. And again, just if you get help from this at all, please let me know. And I'm hoping that my Wednesday videos, if I can keep it consistent, my Wednesday videos are either going to be more like rules breakdowns or a little more talking about other systems, because the other systems are informing how I've been dealing with some things and adding certain rules to make things better. So thank you again. Have a great day.